Hello, I'm Michelle.
And I'm Laura, and this is the Parentrepreneurs Club podcast, a weekly show to help you navigate the demands of being a working parent. We will share lots of practical ideas, hints and tips, and our own and others' experiences with juggling work, family, health and finances. Above all, we want to help you find your purpose, define your identity, and banish any confidence gremlins that might be holding you back from the life you dream of. No matter whether you have children or not, there will be something here for you. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Parentrepreneurs Club podcast. And today, Michelle and I are going to be talking about imposter syndrome. So what we'll do is we'll discuss what imposter syndrome is and how it impacts on both personal and professional lives. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what strategies we can do to overcome it. So first of all, we'll share a little bit of our own experiences of imposter syndrome. And certainly for me, it's something that I've experienced several times in my life. I continue to do so. And, I'm sure Michelle will verify this. I've talked to Michelle about various different ways in which I've experienced it. And it's something that we continually have to self-coach through. And certainly when I had my son, I really struggled with identity and feeling that I'd lost a lot of my skills and knowledge of working within HR when I returned to work. And also, it was about understanding as a parent, I felt that I was inadequate or that I didn't have the right skills and resources. And Michelle, is that something that you've experienced as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it definitely comes when we've got those transitional points. So we see it with our clients, don't we? Either where, you've either becoming a parent or potentially you're going through some life circumstance changes, or you've had that promotion and you're going into a boardroom and you feel like, why do I belong? So absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I studied it when I was doing a psychology degree when I was 18. And I think, it's a theory that was applied and I just couldn't relate to it because I think at 18, 19, you're fairly full of confidence and self-belief and you can't really understand how it feels in a work context. And so on my journey through HR, it was quite apparent, and particularly when I qualified as an NLP coach, it's probably one of the most talked about topics in our coaching sessions. It's just that doubt, isn't it? That pattern of doubt of individuals' accomplishments, like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, and they feel kind of fraudster. Where do I belong? I don't belong here. I certainly felt it. I think when I made a transition point, I had a personal development objective to step up to a HR business partner before I was 30. And I remember sitting with a senior management team and I was the only female and I was very, very young in comparison to my peers. And I sat there month after month at these board meetings feeling like the biggest imposter. 100% relates to our journeys and our career journeys, but it's certainly something that we see quite significantly with our small business owners and our clients that we coach day in, day out.
Definitely. And it's probably the most common topic that comes up in coaching conversations, and even from people that are very successful. And, I've had a client that talks about how she can get up and sing on stage. She's very, very confident, presents to huge organizations, big meetings. But actually, when it came to a small team meeting and a group of tech people that were very using a lot of acronyms and all sorts of internal language that she didn't understand, she really felt out of her depth. And actually understanding that and realizing that she didn't need to know all of those things and she was qualified in her field was enough to get over those barriers. But the initial thought of feeling an imposter because I don't understand exactly what everyone else is talking about, or feeling that you needed to have something else to bring to the room, is that classic of it's a phenomenon of, exactly as you said, of being exposed as a fraud.
Absolutely. And I've met that individual, and to meet them, you would think they are more than confident and capable. Certainly had similar experiences with clients. I've got a lady I've coached very recently, and she's gone on that transitional point where she's been in a C-suite, feels this kind of nausea, as she describes it, whenever she goes in the boardroom to have those conversations. And probably feeling like, why am I here? I don't belong here. And yet she's been given the job title, the salary and the promotion, and yet still feels slightly fraudster. So we've had 5 sessions now, and it's unpicking those beliefs that she holds and why she's feeling like that. And it's so insightful, and it becomes a bit of an aha moment for individuals, doesn't it, to work on that and balance it with those NLP techniques for them to, just feel comfortable with their belonging and why they're there. But I think it's probably one of the most debilitating things that prevent people from driving their careers forward or their businesses forward. Because, certainly like for us, working together, we can overcome it together, and we coach each other, and we encourage and champion each other and kind of each other's cheerleaders, which is great. But when you're on your own and you're running that business on your own, it's so isolating. And if you go into that networking session and you're feeling like an imposter, like, why am I here? I'm new. I don't belong with all these people who are successful within my local community. Or standing in front of your first client to do a pitch, it can actually stop people from doing that and prohibit them moving their business forward. And yeah, we've certainly seen it, haven't we, where people have just gone, actually, we've set out on this journey, we've done it for 6 months and it's not worked, and they put it down to a failure or the market's not there. But I think if you actually dig deep enough, the individuals experience somewhat a level of imposter syndrome, and they've not recognized that. Because like we said, they can exude this element of confidence. They can be really gregarious and kind of what I would call like a high D character, really dominant, really assertive. And, I resonate back to somebody I worked with many years ago. And, to meet him, you would just be like, wow, he's phenomenal. But to put him up in front of 100 people to do a presentation, and he'd be like, I don't know what I need to talk about, Michelle. I really don't know. And he'd literally clam up. So yeah, I think it's definitely, for me, it's what we see time and time again that can be prohibiting people's business growth and business development.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, as you touched on there, it's understanding the origins and the cognitive patterns of what actually perpetuates that self-doubt. So that comes into a bit of self-awareness as well, which we say is the kind of the pillar for coaching, is being self-aware. So it's not just understanding what's going on around you, but realizing what's going on internally as well. So are you looking back at situations and imagining something that isn't really there? Because we all create these scenarios. Oh my goodness, it was horrendous. Everyone was looking at me. I just wanted the ground to swallow me up because I just felt so bad. And actually, the reality was the people who were watching didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So it's being able to look and say, what is the truth among this? What are the facts that I'm looking at, rather than what my brain's telling me I'm feeling and how that's being replayed in your mind.
Definitely. And it can go way back into some people's journeys, can't it? They can be told at a young age they can't do something. So I was told, really early on in my career, that my attention to detail isn't great. And I know that, and I own that, but I think that there is now there is a limiting belief for me. So every time I do something, it really prohibits me, because I think, oh crikey, have I dotted the I, have I crossed the T, are there any typos, are there any issues? But it stops my pace, because what I like to do and why I make the mistakes is I like to work quickly and efficiently. So it's like a chicken and egg situation. But if anybody then spotlights a mistake I make, it goes back into that feeling of what I felt like when I was 21, and one of my first line managers saying, you need to get this right, you need to do it again, you're rushing, you're doing it wrong. And it can go back to childhood, can't it? We've seen it with people where, they can be told from a young age they're not very good at maths. And so when they're pitching for clients and they're talking about numbers, just watch Dragon's Den on a Sunday night. People clam up in the weirdest of areas sometimes, and it can go back to what you've been told when you're a child that you can't do or you struggle to do. And that obviously then holds you back in your own beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that is when you are self-aware of, okay, well, you understand the difference of why you maybe make some mistakes in details, then it doesn't matter, because you're kind of aware that you can deal with it. So you either know that you need to check something, or you get somebody else to do that part of it. And I think that's where, as business owners, we need to be more aware of the skills that we have and the skills that we need to find from other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we've talked about that in a previous podcast as well, haven't we? I know one springs to mind with Caroline, and when we to business, and she talks about her VA outsource business. And we're doing a lot of that in our business now, aren't we? We understand that we don't have the time and the capacity, but also sometimes we don't have the skills, and we know that and we recognise that. Whereas that's exactly the point, isn't it? Sometimes we've come across people who think they can do everything, and they don't accept that there is an issue in an area, and they potentially are masking this kind of belief that they can. They're not understanding the areas that they're unable to achieve. I think it's a real focus on conversations, and I'd probably go to an extent of probably 60% of the conversations come back to some element of imposter syndrome. People at all different levels and different journeys into their business cycle have an element of this at some point, don't they?
Yeah, and I think we sometimes refer to an analogy of holding that mirror up against yourself, and that's what coaching does. But also, if you think of in terms of self-awareness, how many times have you been out and you've got lipstick on your tooth, and one of your friends has said, "Oh, you've got lipstick on your tooth." You run to the bathroom, you check it in the mirror, and you do something about it. Whereas actually, if you'd gone home and then looked in the mirror and nobody had told you, you'd probably feel more self-conscious of the fact that you'd sat throughout a meal or whatever with lipstick on your tooth.
Yeah.
So the quicker we can become self-aware, the better it is for us, because we don't then make that into a bigger situation. And I think it's just being comfortable with that, of actually exploring what is it that's driving that imposter syndrome before trying to find a solution, because it's not always what we think it is.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes that I absolutely love is "Stop thinking you're an imposter and start know you're an improver." And that just encapsulates it all for me. Really work on the fact that you can develop yourself and not have that sort of prohibiting belief that you can't do something, because that is, like we say, that's where we see that perceived element of failure with individuals. So shall we just share with our listeners some tips? Because obviously we can give some nuggets away around what we would suggest to overcome some of this self-awareness piece. So I think one of the things that I would say to our clients quite heavily is really take the time on a weekly basis, or even at best on a monthly basis if you can't commit to weekly, to just reflect on what your achievements are and what your skills have been during that week. So I call it the 3 weekly wins and the 3 weekly woes, and really focusing on those wins. And it's a bit of a cultural thing in this country, I think. We're so good at reminding ourselves what's gone wrong. And we'll talk on a Friday, won't we, Laura? Like, how's things been? How's the last day or so been? And we most of the time we're talking every day, but it's getting that element of focusing on that positive. So what have I done? What's been amazing, and how did it make me feel? And what skills have I got to do that? And just keeping a journal of those successes and challenges. So when you are in that situation of feeling a bit downtrodden and lacking that kind of confidence and self-belief, you've got that as a reference point. It's really, really insightful. And, feel free to share those feelings with trusted friends, or even better, a coach like ourselves. Just openly communicate how you felt, because you're not alone. Nobody's alone, and that's part of what our community is about, isn't it? That we can share that as a community together. For me, I've got a client at the moment, and she said it's just been so powerful to look back on the last 6 months of our coaching journey around her weekly dialogue. And she said, it's because I'm having coaching. Well, it's not. It's just because I'm pointing you and signposting you to be more self-aware. You're obviously reflecting on that, and you're taking the time to reflect. So I'm holding you to account to do that. But I think it's a great piece of personal development. It's really, really useful. So I think you've probably got a couple of tips as well, Laura, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just building on that, it's about embracing failure as well. And understanding that mistakes are just part of growth. So actually, if we start to see them as a learning journey rather than focusing on the mistake, we can improve on that. So certainly in business, I look back at the last 2-3 years, and I would do things completely different now to what I did when I started out. Because we learn, we learn from our mistakes, and we evolve. And touching on that point you said about sharing with other people, sometimes it's about having experts from other industries or networking groups that you can share those things with, and say, actually, can we just get this different perspective? Because we only see our own vision of what we want and can't necessarily see it from another point of view. Particularly in business, it's about being able to step into the shoes of your customer and say, what is it that they want, rather than what is it that I think they want.
Yeah,
Um, the other thing I would say on there is just defining goals. So, and being realistic about your goals. So even if it comes to something as simple as when you're talking about journaling, somebody might find that really difficult to journal every day or even every week. So what's realistic to you? What can you actually achieve? And it might just be, I'm just going to jot down one thing this week that's gone well on a Friday. Or even if I'm not going to jot it down, because I've had a client before that said to me they don't like writing things down because they feel that somebody could pick it up and read it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, because again, this is just building on confidence, but it's that same thing of, okay, well, if that's a fear, then start with just doing it in your head and just reflecting and saying, okay, well, I'm just going to take 10 minutes out just to think about what's gone well this week and just acknowledge it within myself, as a small start. So yeah, it's just those little small victories that can make a big difference, and making sure we recognize them.
Absolutely. And I think when you mentioned it earlier, the looking in the mirror. Now, I got told many years ago, and I hate looking in the mirror. I'm not one of those people, but I got told many years ago, when you walk past a mirror, just have that self-talk. Literally do the prep talk for literally a couple of minutes. And most houses have a mirror in a hallway or in the bathroom. You've got a mirror somewhere, and just do that self-talk maybe once a day when you brush your teeth at night. I've got a mirror in here, and I'm sure if I was going onto a client picture, it's a bit difficult. I could turn around and just do the self-talk. Come on, sort yourself out. I know it sounds a little bit cliche, and you're either comfortable with it or you're not, and that's exactly about you setting those realistic goals. But it is a good technique for people to do if they're not necessarily going to do the journaling piece. We kind of need to hold that mirror up sometimes, literal mirror, and do that self-talk and understand what it is we're facing as a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. That holding the mirror up to yourself, really understand what it is that is creating the imposter syndrome, and what it is that's motivating you. So, why is it that the imposter syndrome is holding you back? What is it that you're trying to achieve? The classic coaching question that we use all the time is, what outcome do you want?
Yeah.
And that's really the driver that will get you to where you need to be. So if the imposter syndrome is something around doing a big presentation, or you're feeling that you're not confident enough to do it, what will that bring you when you achieve it? And is the goal worth the effort? Yeah.
Absolutely, and that goes back into when we did more business projects. So certainly when I was doing more of the organisation design stuff, you as a business owner, and whether you're in a corporate or whether you run your own business, I would use the analogy of what you're trying to make, and that's your business plan. So what you're making every year, and it's like a cake recipe, and all the things go into that. And that biggest part of that recipe is your people, and whether it's you as a business owner or whether it's you as a team of 10. It's a huge part of what goes into that business plan, and it's what motivates and drives the business forward, isn't it? What those goals and ambitions are for you and those other people in that team. So that coaching question sits really nicely, doesn't it, about what you're trying to achieve against what the business plan might look like as well. So it's important that we don't forget that. What was our original purpose when we set out the business against what am I trying to do as an individual, and am I now trying to do something slightly different? I think that's a whole other podcast that we can shoehorn in another day, but it's important to remember that when we talk about imposter syndrome, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, just to summarize on what we've said, it's really, imposter syndrome, it is a phenomenon. So it's a hurdle that can be overcome. It doesn't have to hold you back, and really by understanding its nature, where it's coming from, seeking that support, and then embracing some of these strategies that we've talked about, you can really, get over the imposter syndrome and achieve your true potential and what it is that you want to get as that goal that you're focusing on. So we'll end on that note, and we'll be really interested if anybody is experiencing imposter syndrome, or they've had it before, or can relate to this episode. Please do get in touch. Otherwise, we will see you next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We rely heavily on word of mouth, so if you found value in this episode, please hit subscribe and share it with family and friends.
If you'd like to find out a bit more about us, you can find us on our Facebook group, Parentrepreneurs Club, or alternatively on Instagram, Parentrepreneurs_Club. We hope you have a great week and we look forward to talking to you next time.